You've read the headlines, you've seen the salaries, 100K, 200K, 300K and beyond working from home. But how do you actually go and land that huge tech salary? How do you break into the industry if you're brand new, if you don't yet have experience and you're trying to work a remote job, if you're trying to learn something brand new and break into the industry? In this video, I'm going to talk about exactly how people get hired, why they get hired for so much money, why they can work remote, as well as how you can accomplish this for yourself. I'm going to pull back the curtain and I'm going to share everything that I know in this video so that you can get a piece of this pie for yourself. My name is Jake. I used to work at Amazon, and so I've seen this done over and over again at different companies. All right, and so without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. All right, so this is going to be a good one. You will not want to miss this, okay? So we're going to talk about three things in this video. The how. How do people actually get hired? Where does this come from? And what do the mechanics look like so that you can better understand what to expect as an applicant? The second part, I'm going to talk about why. Why do people get paid so much? Why can they work remote? And so on and so forth. And then the third part, I'm going to talk about how you can actually go and then break into the industry, right? If you're brand new, if you're trying to learn to code or what have you, right? And so without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, so you've seen the salaries, and companies will hire for crazy amounts, but how do they actually do it? It all starts with a business decision, all right? So it's a business decision, likely from the CEO or some department head that says, hey, look, we are going to invest in this area of our company. We're going to go hire engineers because we think we can solve a valuable problem to our customers. We think we can solve a valuable problem that's going to make us, the business, a lot more money than hiring the engineers is going to cost, right? And so if you ever wondered why, some engineers can make north of 500 grand, well, it's because they're so valuable. They make the business so much money that they can get paid so much, right? The number one thing that you got to remember is that business is not a charity. If somebody can earn a certain salary, that means they are immensely valuable to the business. Otherwise, the business would not pay them that much, right? And so it starts with a business decision to invest, right? To invest in manpower to actually solve a problem, right? Solve a problem, and they think the business is going to make a lot of money, all right? And so solving a problem could be, a variety of things. It's like maybe they want to hire an engineer that can boost the conversion rate on their site by 1% by improving the latency of some server, across the world, all right? That's one niche example of what might be the case, but you kind of get the point here. The reason they hire engineers is to make money, right? So it starts with a business decision. Now, once that business decision happens, they're saying, hey, look, we want to invest in this area. We want to hire engineers. That's when that decision is passed off to the recruiters, all right? And so the recruiters say, hey, look, we're hiring for this many roles. We're hiring for these job titles, and they're going to get a budget as well as hiring goals, right? They're going to get a budget as well as hiring goals. And they're basically told, hey, look, let's go out and hire these engineers. Let's go out and do this so that we can, we can grow our business, so to speak, right? And so as an applicant, right, as somebody trying to break into the industry, sometimes you got to take a step back and understand from their perspective what they're trying to do. Because sometimes if you can better understand their goals and you can pitch yourself, as solving their goals, right, you have a much higher likelihood of, getting hired in that regard, all right? So recruiters get the budget, they get the hiring goals, and then from there, they're just doing their job, all right? So their goal is to build as big of a pipeline as possible. And what do I mean by pipeline, all right? So what do I mean by pipeline? If you think of recruiting as a big funnel, right? At the top of the funnel, you have so you really got the job post, and then you got the applicants, right? And then it's a matter of weeding the applicants down until the business has sent offers, and then ultimately offers accepted, right? And even after this point, right? So imagine this is a big funnel right here, offers accepted, and then you got to deal with attrition, right? People leave companies, and you have to hire more engineers, right? This is a natural fact of life, okay? And so the goal of the recruiter here is to go and get as many qualified applicants as possible. It's no different than a marketing funnel. It's no different than a sales funnel. They want to fill as many of these as possible, all right? Which means, from your perspective, if you see a new job post and you just throw your resume into a pile, well, odds are there's going to be hundreds of people, hundreds of people and bots basically that you are competing against, right? You're basically throwing your resume into a giant void of other applicants, of other resumes, and other people trying to get after this money. And that's another thing that you need to be aware of is like when companies post job posts on LinkedIn, a lot of times these job posts are just spammed with bots or kind of bullshit applicants, just because that's out there, and that's something you got to compete against that noise. And we'll talk about how you can beat that noise and how you can give yourself a leg up later on in this video, but that's basically what's going on, right? And so the recruiters are going to build their pipeline, and once they build their pipeline, then comes this step of assessing whether somebody is sharp enough technically, right? So there is the technical assessment. I'm going to put in a parenthesis S. They want to see if you can actually code. They want to see if you can actually solve problems, that you're going to be a valuable employee to them. Because remember, their goal is to make money. That's why they can pay you, right? And so it's in their best interest. They have to see whether or not you are actually valuable, right? And there's no shortcutting that, right? Ultimately, you have to be good enough to pass technical interviews. But there's ways to boost your probability that you can pass these interviews and get hired in this remote, high-paying job, right? And then after these technical assessments, that's when offers get sent, and that's when people can choose whether or not they accept and whether or not they go to work for the company, right? And this is, obviously every company is slightly different, and every company is going to have their own process, but more or less, this is what happens from the company's perspective when they go to hire people, right? And so the question becomes, why do engineers make so much money, right? This is basically the recruiting process for any company out there, all right? But why do engineers in specific make so much money? Why do front-end developers make so much money? Why do people that know how to code make so much money, right? And it comes back to one simple thing, number one thing, and that is money. And that is true for most things in life as well, right? The reason that engineers are compensated so well is because they are valuable. They solve, I don't know what that red is there. I don't know how we can get rid of that. There we go. They solve valuable problems, right? So they solve valuable problems, which means, right, if you can think of Amazon, for example, all right, Amazon serves pretty much the entire world with their AWS, all right? And so that is millions and millions and millions of dollars of revenue. If one engineer can come in and cut costs by 1% or 0.1%, Amazon just saved millions of dollars in overhead, right? And in traditional careers, the scope of somebody's impact, the scope of an employee's impact is so minuscule that, the business can only afford to compensate somebody for the level of impact that they have, right? But the thing is with engineers, because everything is on a computer, everything is automated, software can scale, right? It can scale without human labor. It is immensely valuable, so valuable that one engineer can have a super outsized impact on the business, right? And so one engineer can make the business, millions of dollars, all right? And you got to ask yourself, wouldn't it make sense if you ran a business and somebody came in and said, hey, look, I can make you millions of dollars, but in return, you have to pay me 500 grand for my services. Of course you would take that, right? If you can trade $1 and get back 5 in return, you're going to take that every single time, all right? And so that's why engineers are valuable. And look, if you're looking in from the outside and you're like, well, I don't know how to be that valuable. I don't know how to solve $1 million problems. Maybe I'm not smart enough. Look, the path lights up as you walk it, right? When you're first learning how to code, you have no idea the business cases, you have no idea the projects you're going to be working on, and so on and so forth. All you've seen is the salary, and that's likely been enough to draw you in. But what I can tell you is when you get into the industry, there's a slew of problems. There's infinite problems out there to solve. You got fintech company A wanting to revolutionize wealth tech. You've got another store trying to sell software across the world. You've got AWS trying to build the internet infrastructure of the world to power every major software company out there. Right? And there's just so many problems, and there's so many valuable problems out there. Okay. And so, if you go and learn the skill of coding, even if AI starts to write most of the code out there, you'll never be replaced because you are valuable, right? You know how to solve valuable problems for businesses. Okay. And so that's why people get paid so much. All right. And let's keep going here. All right. So how, let's say you want to go ahead and do this for yourself. You're not already in the industry, or maybe you're in the industry and you want to level up. Let's talk about how you can do this for yourself. All right. So how are you going to make the money yourself, right? How are you going to get your first opportunity? How are you going to get let's move this over here. how are you going to get your first opportunity, okay? And so, if you're looking for a way to break into tech, you don't know how to get that experience, or maybe you already know how to code a little bit, but you've never had that first opportunity. Well, that's part of the problem that I'm tackling with Frontend Future, right? And if you're so inclined, if you're wanting to learn how to code, if you're wanting to land that first remote six-figure tech job, click the link down below in the description. I'll walk you through exactly how we get you that experience guaranteed so that you can skip the line, so that you can break into the industry faster than anybody else, all right? But if you want to go the hard way, if you want to, do this by hand, so to speak, here's how you can get that first opportunity. Remember when I said that recruiting is just a big funnel, right? And ultimately, by applying online, by just throwing your resume everywhere, you're just going to be one name in a slew of hundreds of names, right? And it's very hard to stand out that way, okay? It's very hard to stand out that way. And so it begs the question, how can you compete? How can you compete with just 1% of people as opposed to 99% of people? How can you be different, right? You want to stand out. You want to stand out because look, the reality is 99% of people will never, they never earn six figures, they won't work remote, they won't level up, and so on and so forth, right? And so if you're trying to copy what everyone else is doing and taking the easiest path, right? You see these jobs posted on LinkedIn, you're just taking the easiest path of applying online. Look, you're going to be competing with the 99%. Now, I was never the best, I had to fight my way in, right? I had to kind of take the back door, and I didn't want to compete with everybody because look, there's a lot of coders out there, there's a lot of engineers, there's a lot of front-end developers, back-end developers that have been coding since they were very young. And, I, at the time, just couldn't compete with that. And so I had to find another way, an easier way, a back door that could give me that leg up on other people that were going after these same jobs, these same roles, all right? And so the way that I actually did this is through the back door, all right? And so what is the back door? What is the back door and how can you take the shortcut for yourself, all right? What is the back door and how can you take that shortcut for yourself? The back door is through people. It's through knowing somebody, an engineer at the company, a designer at the company, a product manager at the company, having a friend, having a connection at the company who can help get you into that company, right? And so what do people actually do? They can refer you, right? They can refer you. And don't worry if you don't yet have a network built out in tech. I'm going to talk about exactly how you can kind of, not necessarily game the system, but manufacture this same kind of referral system or interview system, right? And so what does getting referred do? It gets you the interview, right? And so remember earlier when I was talking about how marketing is a big funnel of, applicants, and then you got interviews, and then you got offers. Well, if you're wanting to skip this step right here and go basically straight to an interview, getting referred is the way that you do that. That is the way that you skip the 99% and put yourself in a pool of competing with 1%, right? Because the reality is, if you get to the interview stage, you're only a few steps away. Assuming you can pass an interview, it's just on you that, you can beat out maybe one or two people as opposed to hundreds, as opposed to thousands of people, all right? And so how do you actually get people to refer you? Well, I've put together a lot of resources about this, some of which are included in the free training down below in the description. You click the link, you watch that free training. We go way more into depth about this specifically. But there's all kind of ways, right? You've got LinkedIn, you've got Reddit, you've got friends, you've got hackathons, Discords, you name it. The list goes on and on, right? And what you're looking for here is just one person who is willing to refer you to their company or to a different company, right? So that you can get the interview. You're not asking for a job, you're not being needy, you're not being a nuisance, right? Recruiters want good talent on their team if they're hiring for a role. Now, obviously, if a company's not hiring, there's really no point in putting effort or pushing for a job that they're just not hiring for. But if a company's trying to hire, a recruiter would love to speak with you so long as you can demonstrate that you're not going to waste their time, all right? And so all you're looking for is one person who can scoot you up to this interview, and so that you have the opportunity to prove yourself. Even if you don't yet have experience, even if you've not yet broken into tech or had your first tech job, right? Your goal right here is just to connect with one person that can help get you an interview, all right? And at that point, it's just on you to pass the interview. And after that, once you've gotten the interview, you are just a couple short steps away from making the big bucks, from breaking into tech and making a remote 6-figure salary, all right? And if you'd like my help to show you exactly how to do this, if you'd like my help to actually learn how to code, actually break into tech so that you can do this as quickly as possible, click the link down below in the description. Put together a free training for you. You can even hop on the phone with my team and we'll walk you through exactly how you can do this for yourself, all right? So without further ado, if you have any questions, drop them down below in the comments. Happy to answer them. Otherwise, I appreciate you watching the video and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.